So, born in California, raised in Ohio. High school, Houston, went in the Army. Moved to the Dallas area in 1993. Met my wife in 93. She was born and raised in a small city called Farmers Branch, Texas. Got engaged in 94. Married in 95. First child in 96. House in 97. Second child in 98. Took 5 off. Had another child. Pretty much was in counseling all the way through the whole way. When you look at me today at 48, there's 3 words that come to my heart. First one is grateful. Thank you for allowing me to step into your life for a couple of minutes. I got 40 minutes. Second thing, very proud. Love to be able to work. You can work in Hong Kong or you can work with the City of Hurst. It's just different. And the third one is excited. Because when I do work with the City of Allen, they say, sure wish we were able to do something like this. When you work with the City of Bryan, they say, I've heard about this, where they literally let the employees learn and get better. So this morning you heard the question, are you committed? And it makes me think of getting married. And commitment's a big word, because when I got married, the priest did not ask me if I was bought in. But you'll hear the word buy-in, right? We need your buy-in. Well, we're not going to really do it until we get the mayor's buy-in or the city manager's buy-in, or right? There's a big difference between commitment and buy-in, and I really do want to kind of pull that all together. Jim Collins wrote the book, Good to Great. I've actually had a chance to have a cup of coffee with Jim Collins. Now, please don't think it was me and him just like this. It was me and about 200 other 50 cats who all paid a whack of cash to have a cup of coffee with Jim Collins. And when you think of some of the things that Jim Collins was talking about, he really did say, and it says this right here, he spoke about 2 types of leaders. He talked about the involved leader and the supportive leader. Kind of like when you're a parent. When I played soccer in Ohio, I had 13 games as an entire season. If my father went to 1 game, he was a hero. My son plays for FC Dallas. He has 46 games. Some are out of the country, most are out of the city, and some are out of the state. If parents today miss 1 game, it's like, where's Brunel? I think he's traveling. What a loser parent. It's like somebody changed the rules. It's like, man, I'm trying for 80% here, but there's a difference between being a supportive parent and an involved parent. Supportive leaders and involved leaders. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. If you look at the title of this keynote, there's a keynote, and in every keynote there needs to be 1 key message. And what do you guys think of, and back at the office, what do you think the 3 biggest problems of people working together? What do you think they are? What do you think the 3 biggest problems of people working together? You're exactly right. It's people working together. And how do we make that happen when we are important people doing important work? Somebody tell me who these 2 ladies are. They became famous August 21st of this year. Yeah, they were the what? They're the first 2 female Rangers to graduate from Ranger School. And so when you look at the thing of Ranger School today is 64 days. When I went through Ranger School, it was 58 days. They've added 1 day per phase. Over 400 people started in this class, Ranger class. And 96 graduated. 19 females started. These 2 females were able to complete it. And so when you think of people working together in 21 years of working with high-performing companies and high-performing people, I kind of whittle it down to 2 things. It's not about working smarter and not harder. That's very 1996. Now the new kind of frontier where we're going is, can you work differently and can you work together? And that goes for every grandparent in this room, goes for every sister in this room, goes for every aunt in this room. But these two ladies really did kind of hit the news as people who can do two things: work differently and then work together. Becoming a U.S. Airborne Ranger. So don't you just love that picture? I mean, like, I had a German Shepherd all the way through A&M. He was a 130-pound German Shepherd. And this specific dog right here was trained to do three things. Sniff out IEDs, and you can tell he missed one. He has a prosthetic leg. He does have the Medal of Honor around for animals. And this animal right here is from the 1st Ranger Battalion. You can see it right on his neck, the 1st Ranger Battalion. I was in the 2nd Ranger Battalion. This dog specifically, this is the June issue of 2014 National Geographic, in case you want to go back and read it. The dog's nose is 100,000 times more acute than the human nose. It actually has 3 olfactory systems sitting inside. This dog here was trained every day to sniff an Olympic-sized pool, sniff an Olympic-sized pool, sniff an Olympic-sized pool, day after day after day, month after month. And then one day, one person would put 3 drops of sugar water in one pool, and that dog would come in and sniff it. That rocks. That's awesome. But when you look at Ranger School is broken up into 4 phases. You got the garrison phase, and that's at Fort Benning. We called it Fort Beginning because we were about ready to begin some kind of hell. Yeah? And so when you've got 4 guys in one barracks, one room, and this is in the winter, this is in February. It starts and it's 5 days, and the Ranger instructors, the RIs, come in, and they got these things called bolt cutters, and they just ratcheted them around those bunk beds. And what you have to do now is you have to make the walls sweat before you can leave your barracks to go outside to do PT. You guys pick it up when I'm laying down? So what does that mean? You got to do a truckload of jumping jacks to be able to get that wall to sweat before you can go outside. That's the garrison phase. Then, if you pass the garrison phase, you go due north to the mountains. And this is where you do up and down, and you run all these patrols in the mountain phase. But what's the next one? The desert phase. This is where you go to Dahlonega, Utah, and you land in this vast desert. And during the day, it's about 90. And at night, it's about 30, and your ears start to get real big, and they call them cauliflower ears because they start to get blistered and all messed up. But in the desert, here's the jacked up part. You can't tell where anything is. Like, the only reason I can tell you're there is because this is here, and I've got some depth perception. But they put a fire way out in the middle of nowhere, and they go, that's the enemy. And you're like, I think we should low crawl. Some guys are like, I think we should walk. Some guys are like, we need to do a whole new different thing. But in the desert, you have no depth perception, which leads you to the swamp phase. Now think about this. It's cold. It's in the winter, and now we're going to go to the swamp phase. And in the swamp phase, they really want to know one thing now, and that is, how tired are you and what you got? Because you know what they're looking for? Each and every phase of Ranger School, they're checking for one thing. And that one thing is, who are you doing this for? Who are you doing this for? So when it comes to working differently and working together, it ain't for everybody. Because not all dogs can go and sniff out IEDs. Some dogs are too loyal. Some are too playful. Some are too skittish when it comes to bombs going off. Yeah? So not everybody can be a servant leader. Some people see servant leader as, I have to be subservient. No. Servant leader is an approach, just like you can be an inquiring leader. You can be all types of leaders, an iron fist leader. But the number one thing when it comes to Ranger School is who you doing it for, and can you work differently, and can you work together. In Ranger School, what they're looking for is your EQ. And this is an emerging new thing that's out there. And EQ is your emotional quotient. So EQ, the emotional quotient, answers 4 questions. Do you even know your own emotions? Can you modulate your emotions, tune them up, tune them down? Can you make decisions with your emotions, smart, right, healthy, and successful? But here's the last one. And this is where leadership comes in, is can you help other people with their emotions? Remember, not everybody can work differently, and not everybody can work together. Which one do you think you can impact the most when you're our age right now? IQ or EQ? We can impact our EQ a lot more. Absolutely. There's 3 types of personalities that you have as an individual. There's 3 personas that you can have as a ranger, as a colleague, as a resident, at a council meeting. The first one is called your underlying persona. And this is one, if there was a camera on you, you didn't know it. No one really gets to see this side of you when no one's looking. The second one is called your everyday persona. This is when you're going to the City of Hurst, and you're like walking in and you're on the parks team, and the camera's here, and you're like, this is the best me. But look at the third one. This is what Ranger School was all about. This is what life is like when budgets are down, when taxes needed to be raised and the community doesn't want it. Now everybody's in what kind of a mindset? An overextended mindset. Can you still work differently and work together when you're in your overextended, under-stressed kind of persona? Here's what it looks like. That's me in my backyard in Farmers Branch, Texas. On July the 4th, we had a huge crawfish boil. That's me in my underlying persona. Here's me when I'm at work. It's my best me. But here's me when I'm overextended. Way too much candy. Way too much candy. So can you be working differently, and can you be working together all the while understanding that we're important people doing important work? This is the first time in 21 years that I have seen a city step aside and say over and over and over and over again, thank you. So here's what I've learned when people who work together and they do it really well. Here's 3 things I've learned. If you can do these 3 things, which I've heard you can, we ought to be grateful. The first one is be soft on the people. Be hard on the problem. I've seen many people be hard on the what? Person, while they're hard on the... So it seems so simple to be what? Soft on the people, while you're hard on the problem. So we as a city say, thank you. Because there are some residents in our neighborhoods that maybe we would like to be hard on the what? People, while we're hard on the problem. Number 2. You'll hear a lot of people say this phrase, I want to put my foot down on this. Well, here's what I'm asking. Don't leave a foot what? Don't leave a footprint. That takes skill. It doesn't take goodwill. Remember, I've been married for 20 years. How many rings are in every marriage? 51 years? I've learned that there's 3 rings to every marriage. There's the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and the suffer ring. Yeah? And if you move and you put your foot down and you leave a footprint, you have now entered into the suffer ring. Number 3. When I work with people and they really do get servant leadership and being a servant to people, with people, it's when they're less worried what people think about them and they're more worried the way people like themselves more when they're around you. So think about that. I don't really have to worry about what people think of me. Really what I have to worry about is that people like themselves more when they're around me. Thank you. Thank you for being people that can put your foot down without leaving a footprint, who can be soft on the people while you're hard on the problem. I got a 19-year-old. She goes to Texas State. I got a 17-year-old. She's a junior. I got a 12-year-old. She's in 6th grade. And being soft on the people and hard on the problem at the end of the day, I'm telling you, it takes what? Real skill, not just goodwill. So when people are in this environment and they're overextended, can you still work together and can you still work differently? There's 24 personality traits. When I was an airborne ranger, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a colleague, I'm a superior. I've only got 24 traits. And these 24 traits make up your personality. Every one of these traits is in your capacity. Some of these traits, though, are not in your preference. There are people on this planet, they do not want to take charge. And please don't put me in charge. I will disappoint you every time. There are people on this planet, they can collaborate, but it's not in their what? Preference. There are people on this planet who are not spontaneous. I am not spontaneous. If you told me we were going to Target first, then we were going to Home Depot, you flip those two things around? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why are we laughing? Well, one, because it's true, and two, because it's a little uncomfortable. But those are the only 24. When you look at people's top traits and people's bottom traits, we call them balcony behaviors and basement behaviors. There are some people, collaboration, it's one of their basement traits. It's not a bad trait. It's just, I don't do it naturally. I don't do collaboration naturally. I don't work well with people naturally. I can do it. It just doesn't come what? Natural. My father was a wonderful parent. Wonderful parent. And did I grow up in a home where the tallest people on the planet smacked the heck out of the smallest people on the planet? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And my father was very tough. And tough is right there. This is my word cloud. And look at me on tough. I can do it. It's just not in my what? It's just not in my preference. So when you are an airborne ranger, and now sometimes I have to tune that toughness up, or sometimes I have to tune that down, we need to be mindful of that. This morning we talked about this thing called perception. And when you are in the business of being a servant, it comes down to 4 words. How does one see? And we have a working session this morning called intention. What's your intention? I just wrote a blog called Winning with Intent, Not Your Ego. And so when we are in the community, the way we are received is all based on how we are perceived. True? So you can't change people's behavior. The only thing that you can influence is their perception. Their perception has to then be followed by your behaviors. You guys have all heard the word competition. You've all heard the word cooperation. I grew up with Sesame Street, Bert and Ernie, Snuffleupagus, Big Bird. That's where I grew up. And I was taught that I had to what? Cooperate. But now in 1997, that was the first time collaboration was ever used in a business sense. Look at the difference between a competitive relationship, a cooperative relationship, but look at a collaborative relationship, one that I would want with my spouse, one that I would want with my son, one that I would want with my colleague. The needs have to be what? Interdependent. The motivation of police working with every other department has to be what? It has to be optimal return for both. When you are in a relationship that's collaborative, the trust level has to be what? Implicit. High. And the power has to be shared. So when we say we must collaborate to work differently and together, there is a set of behaviors that fits quite nicely behind that. True? So beget my spouse, so beget my partner, so beget my loved one, so beget my colleague, so beget anybody in the community. Not everybody can do it. Those are all words. But they all take different behaviors. And when you're at the highest level of collaboration, that's when you can work differently and you can work together even though you are very, very under pressure. Did you think about it that way? That the middle word of collaborate is what? I have to labor. In order for me to stay in love with my wife, I have to labor these things. In order for me to love my 19-year-old, I must labor. I must labor in honesty, positive attitude. Sometimes my attitude needs some altitude. Dedication. That's where the word commitment is. Commitment's here, love is here. Love might be gone, but you're still what? It's like DOS and Windows. When DOS is here, Windows just makes it look pretty. Commitment's here, love just makes it look pretty, but sometimes love is gone. Work environment. We talked about the work environment, the teamwork that has to happen, the work environment, the professionalism, and what's the last one? Respect. What are these, ladies and gentlemen? What are these? These are called the Code of Ideals. Is that right? These are... Got that nailed. Okay? So we must continue to labor on those things. Now we have to celebrate our roles within this organization here. And I do want to start with my first buddies. My first buddies, animal service, come on. Who wouldn't want to have one of those cats on your team? Yeah? Then we got all of these important people doing important work. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to work together. And I stop with engineering. Why? Because my father's an engineer. He sees things very linear. We used to tell a joke at the house. Dad, how do you know when you're talking to an extroverted engineer? When he is staring at somebody else's shoes. Found no humor in that. Found no humor in that. And then he had a newspaper and it was all downhill after that. Thank you. Thank you to the people up here. Thank you to the people out here. These are the important people doing important work, trying to work together, even under pressure to do two things. Work differently and work together. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. R. Hawkins. And he did some research and he said, this is the energy level. This is the energy level that it takes for you to have these emotions. So shame is the least one. Then guilt, then apathy. But that's not who we are. Here's where we are. We're in the world where it takes more energy to be courageous, more energy to be accepting, more energy to be loving and peaceful. But what's the highest one? Enlightenment. So in order to work together, it takes what? Positive energy. And we got to have some positive fuel to have some positive energy. And where do we get our positive fuel from? From our colleagues. Here are some top behaviors of tenured teams. I was told that the City of Hurst is a very tenured team. Now, to me, that doesn't mean performance. So tenure is not a good indicator of performance. Aligning is an indicator of continued performance. Adapting is a continuation. Adjusting, and so is asserting. Sometimes in a collaborative relationship, you have to assert. I have to assert and get my needs to the table. And if you notice, all four of these words end in ing, which means they're skills. They can be taught. People have taught to talk. People need to be taught to listen. People need to be taught to align and adapt and adjust and assert. In every marriage, in any relationship on this planet, this is where this is at. Things to be mindful in closing. In closing, things to be mindful of. Empathy is the number one skill for the 21st century. Fortune magazine last month, August 1st issue, McKinsey and all the other consulting firms confirmed that that is the skill for the 21st century. Not a skill, it's the skill. And if you can master that skill, you've mastered all skills. Number two, the older we get, what does it say? Uh-oh. So there's a huge demand, and yet there's a small supply. So as we're getting a 3% raise, we also have to grow our skills and approaches by 3%. Leadership team is all about binary moments. When I say leadership, it's the people who can make the decision of what we're going to do without asking for more data. And then last but not least, just because you're 65 doesn't mean you're mature. Okay? I was on a board, and I had a 70-year-old man tell me, I've earned the right to be rude. And I told him straight to his face, there is no age limit to manners. And as an airborne ranger, I was taught that rudeness is the weak man's form of strength. So why don't you just move on out? Because just because you got 11 kids doesn't mean you're a good parent. And just because you sat in a cave for 6 years doesn't mean you're a geologist. And just because you've been doing this role for 35 doesn't mean you've gotten better over time. True? So that is something that we have to be mindful of. So thank you, Team Hurst, for consistently being the difference that makes a difference, putting down your microscope and picking up your mirror, being brain bright, making smart, right, healthy, successful decisions, all the while I'm trying to work differently and work together. And we work in an environment where gray spats last. What does that mean? That means every single relationship I have with this team here, I decide, even if they don't deserve the grace, to give them that grace. I work in a world where grace bats last. Has anybody ever heard this poem? Anybody ever heard this poem? Beautiful Rowdy Prisoners. Here's the City of Hurst Code of Ideals. At the very bottom it says, we hold the Code of Ideals as the key that unlocks our potential. As the key that unlocks our potential for exemplary customer service, satisfaction in a job, and pride in ourselves and our organization. It makes me think of this poem in closing. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage who has to duck his head when the moon is low keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. This culture will not graduate. Cultures don't graduate. People leave, but the culture what? Stays. That's the role and responsibility of all of us in the room, to continue that culture with those 30 new hires, to continue that culture with the new leaders, to continue that culture that's about two things: working differently and working together. All right, what time is it, gang? What time is it? I had till 11:10. What do we got? 11:09. I wonder if he practiced. Steve, I think we're good. Thank you, guys, very much.